some of you might be wondering, because this is a mixed group, right? There are students from humanities, there are students from sciences, technologies, and other departments. But please bear in mind that the more interdisciplinary approaches we understand, we can make our research process, our research journey very fruitful. Because ultimately it is for the society that all researchers are working for. And the society is not just one mix of people, right? So all the scholars from different departments, there will be so much to learn for you, from all these speakers who are from different backgrounds. Great. So one such speaker we have for the next session, Dr.S.BalasivanandhaPrabhu. I'm very glad to be introducing him. He is presently the professor and the head of the Department of Mechanical Engineering, Anna University, Chennai, India. He has over 16 years of teaching, research, and consultancy experience. He obtained his Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering in 1998, post-graduation 2000, and completed his PhD in 2005 from Anna University. Although a mechanical engineer, Dr. S. Balasivanandhaprabhu has also specialized in materials engineering. He has authored 6 book chapters in nanostructured materials, severe plastic deformation, AL lithium alloys, and metal forming, and also edited a book. He has also published a book on superplasticity, published by Springer Nature. He has filed 3 Indian patents, out of which 1 has been awarded in the field of cutting tool materials development. He has also authored 175 research papers in reputed international and national journals and conferences to his credit. He is also a visiting professor at the University of Witwatersrand, South Africa, which he was doing for a brief period earlier, and now he is serving as the editorial board member for International Journal of Composite Materials as well. So with such a rich background, we have Professor Balasivanandhaprabhu, who will be talking to you about technical writing.
So very good morning to one and all present here. I thank the Center for Research for giving me this opportunity to meet all young research scholars. In fact, I am very happy that I can see a lot of young faces. Normally, in the 10 years before or 15 years before, only people with more than 40 years do the research. Now we have more than 25%, I can see more than 75% of the people with 25 plus age group, correct? Yes. So this topic, today I am going to talk about technical writing. Normally, when you ask the student who are in the final year or 4th year or 5th year, normally, whether you have finished the PhD, they said no, I have not yet to publish the paper, I am yet to publish the paper. That means the writing is more difficult. Because now we have different form of a writing that we are accustomed to. We know different form of writing, but this technical writing is somewhat different. So what is technical writing? Especially now when you talk about technical writing, we have 2 forms of writing. One is writing a proposal, research proposal, and another one is research papers. So what I am going to discuss here is about writing a technical article for your PhD. That means it's a journal paper. I'm not going to discuss about the research proposal because it needs another 1 hour discussion to discuss about the research proposal. But what is important for you, because you are not going to do research proposal now, only after completing the PhD, probably as a supervisor, as a faculty member, will be starting writing a proposal to various funding agency. At that time, this research proposal may be helpful. How to write a proposal and what are all the information that you have to provide in the proposal, that and all would be helpful when you become a faculty member or when you become a research advisor or supervisor. At that point of time, it would be helpful for you. But at this point, what is very important for you is writing a paper. So writing a paper here, technical writing is a type of expository writing that is used to convey information on a technical purpose. So how it is different from other writing? So we know different form of a writing. For example, if you take a Hindu, probably we read many articles in the Hindu, okay? So there are different formats of writing in the Hindu. So there is an editorial page, there is a news article about the current incident, something like that. And there are various newspapers available, Hindu, Hindustan Time and Times of Now. And you could be able to see different form of a writing. Even that depends on one capability, okay? And how they convey the message. And when you take this book, can anyone identify who is this and what's the form of this book? Can anyone say? This is a kind of a novel. What kind of a novel? It is a kind of a suspense story, detective story. So there is a lot of difference between reading a paper, reading a magazine, reading a paper, and reading a novel or a suspense story. What is the difference? Probably in a current day-to-day affairs, when you read some newspaper, what is the information that we are passing on? That's all. It's a straightforward information given to you in the paper. There is no articulation, no big investigation. There is no big investigation, because yesterday that incident might have happened and today you will be reading that information because it's a direct information. Whereas in the magazine, some sort of a magazine, this will be published once in a month or twice in a month, where there is an investigation, background investigation about that incident, and there is a elaborate information will be provided based on their investigation. So there is a difference between the news article published in the next day and the news report published 1 week after the incident. So you could be able to differentiate. So the writing pattern itself, it is different in this case. Now, when you come to this, what is this detective novel? You cannot understand what is going on, how the author is describing the incidents. Some of the details would be hidden in the incidents. Only the suspense will be revealed at the end of the page, end of the book. That means you are hiding everything, the secrets and everything you are hiding. Only at the end of the book, you will be revealed what is about that incident. That means suspense writing, it's somewhat different. Okay, then you come to this. There is some kind of a novel where people put their images, imaginary things also. Not only the true, they are also write something imaginary. That's why the novels and other things are written. Okay, that is something different from the technical article writing. Then you have something, the Wings of Fire, it is true story about the person. So that means you cannot know something imaginary kind of a thing you cannot put there. Okay, and come to this is a book I have published which I took 4 years, and where I write only the technical stuff. That is also a different form of a writing. Okay, so whatever I have mentioned here, it's all form of a literature where you come across with the different forms of a writing, and this kind of a writing is also in back of your mind, because you regularly read this kind of a novel, this kind of a paper, this kind of a book, where everything is in the back of a mind. And as a result, what research people think that this is a format of a writing for writing a research paper. It's not so. Okay, and when you come to a paper, it is something different. So what I present here, it's one of the paper I published along with my undergraduate student. Nowadays, it is very difficult to publish a paper with a PhD scholar. I published this paper along with my bachelor degree students who did their bachelor degree work in the 7th semester for a mini project, 2-credit project. They have done a wonderful experimental work. But in fact, they are new to this technical writing. In fact, I corrected several times, more than 15 times, 16 times. As a result, it has got published in a good journal which has impact factor more than 3.5, something like that. In engineering, it is something high impact factor journal. Okay, so now what I am going to discuss, how to write a technical paper. Okay, so the format of writing is something different for this paper. And this technical paper, first of all, you should acknowledge that the technical writing is not used to entertain. You are not going to entertain anyone. Okay, you are straightforward, going to information, going to provide information, data, and your what is called discussion. Okay, then create suspense is not the necessary thing in the technical paper. For example, when we review the paper, nothing would be provided in the introduction or description or in the resultant discussion, and finally in the conclusion suddenly the author used to give some kind of a suspense. Now then we have to ask where from this research came. So that kind of a suspense story should not be included in the technical writing. Okay, then invite different interpretation, that is interpretation in a proper way, different form of a interpretation in the technical article writing. It is not at all advisable. Okay. Now, why technical writing is important? Now, people do work. I do a lot of research work. Like you are also going to do some research work in a particular field. And you should earn the credit for your work. So by way of publication, by way of writing a technical report, you are going to gain, first of all, credit for your work. Okay, credit for your work. Conveying important information, well, that's also very important. That, see, the people who do really the breakthrough technology research, something like exploratory kind of a research, and you have to reveal to the society so that many people will read the information, and you are sharing the information to the global. So sharing the information, then it is obvious that every research needs good and proper documentation. It is also for the proper documentation. Then to attend conferences, also you write papers and then present it in the conferences. By way, you can also develop some sort of a relationship or some sort of a, what is called some sort of a relationship with other researchers also. Then to share research result with other researchers, it is a way of sharing the information. Then to get a view for improvement of your research. Now when you publish a paper in an open platform, and many others will read your work, and they will be also commenting about your work by means of citation, by means of taking your paper as a literature review, and whether it may be a positive review or negative review, it is different. Okay, the citation, I never accept this H-index or something like that. It's a positive way of acknowledging the researchers, because I know one particular other paper that was 1,000 times cited in a negative way. So that means it is not a positive appreciation for the researcher. Okay, so someone will claim that this research is something, researcher data is not a correct data, and 1,000 times it is reported by 1,000 people. That means it's not a real appreciation to the researcher. So that's a way. So H-index, somehow it's okay, but whether it is a positive H-index, okay, that we have to always see when you look at the paper, okay, and also author. To obtain some form of a degree, you are all basically working for PhD degree, okay. No one is interested to study how metal is deforming, why atoms are moving here and there, and it is not the way of spending the time. It probably after a certain time, after you become a professor or you become a researcher, then if you are paid a good amount of salary, then you will be interested to know the fact. But currently you are working for getting a degree. Okay, so always I used to say to the PhD scholar, first work for a degree, then you work for a research, real research. Okay, the real research, it is basically to enrich your knowledge and wisdom. But now it is to obtain a PhD degree. Okay, if you try to spend your entire time in obtaining wisdom, then probably you have to waste all your time. Okay, so first the aim is to obtain the degree. So to obtain some form of a degree, to get recognition and promotion, that is also. And many of the people, research scholars, and in fact the people who put 10 more years of experience still found it difficult to write a proper technical documentation, proper technical paper. Why it is very difficult? Because manner in which the technical paper is written is something different from other usual paper, okay, other usual paper. And also very high expectation nowadays in the journal, because it is not very easy to publish a paper now, because there are certain area where already the saturation comes. So it reaches the saturation. Therefore, very high expectation. If you take up some project problem in some particular area, because immediately the editor or reviewer will say, this area is already saturated, no more publication is allowed in our journal. So that means the expectation is also very high in the publication domain. Therefore, it is very, very difficult nowadays to find a paper to publish in a proper journal. Okay? Then purpose of technical writing. What is the purpose of writing? It is to inform the reader about your work and persuade. Persuade in the form of a discussion. So discussion is a major thing, that you have to basically compromise the reader, that whatever you have done must be acceptable by the reader. Okay, so persuading, it is some form of a discussion by which you are making the reader to understand about your work. Okay, then you have to efficiently communication. This is very important. The efficient communication, efficient way of communicating your data, and efficient way of writing, it's very, very important in the technical writing. Okay, then critical reader, become critical reader of your own paper. So the literature's review is one form of one important thing in the research, literature review. That means you have to read papers. You have to read paper, quite a lot of paper. Probably you have to read more than 150 papers in the initial period of time, initial 1 year. As our Vice Chancellor said, when you initially read some paper, it would be very difficult for you because understanding itself is very difficult. Now you have to read 10 times to understand one particular paper. And once you become aware about how it is presented and what is the way the technical papers are written, then you need not spend time. Within half an hour, no, you can read the paper. Just like that, no, you can read paper. Today I can read 10 papers within 1 hour because I know where the most of the information, which critical informations are, will be presented. So I will read only those lines, not the entire paragraph or entire manuscript or entire paper. Okay, so therefore you have to read every day at least 10 papers. When you read many papers, you will be a critical reader. And you will be also analyzing the positive, negative aspect of these papers. As a result, when you write a paper, you will be a first critical examiner for your paper. When you become a critical reader and you will become a critical examiner for your paper, then you will understand what is the positive and negative of your paper before submission to any particular journal. So critical reading is very, very necessary. Okay, as a result, no, you also become a critical writer. When you become a critics, when you make a critics on other paper, you can also become an expert in writing also. Okay, so here I'm going to, probably this is not visible. So this is a way in which the paper will be written. Probably I have cut and paste some of the thing. So here probably I will skip this paper. I will start discuss about, so just I wanted to show what are all the segments in the paper. So in the technical paper writing, the paper writing can be segmented into 3 categories. One is the beginning portion, then the middle portion, and finally the end portion. So the beginning portion, which carries title, abstract, includes the keyword and also introduction. Then in the middle portion, where you are going to propose the technology or technique, hardware, software developed, and then appropriate application of a technique, and also the resultant discussion. This is the middle portion of the paper. Then finally, it is conclusion, acknowledgement, references, and appendix. Okay, so this is the body or the organization of any technical paper. Now, how each segment should be written. Now, for example, if you take a title, the title, writing a title is very, very important. First, when you write a title, you should present what is the area in which you are going to work. So the broader area of the work must be reflected on the title. Then what is the area you are working? What is the problem that you are working? That must be also presented in the paper, title. That means the title is an indication of what is your work. So the title should reflect what is your work. So you should write in a short form what is all about your work. Suppose, for example, I am going to study the effect of X parameter or Y parameter on the behavior of this thing processed by this thing. So everything must be covered there. Okay. So the title is very important. It must be very, very short and also more meaningful, okay, and reflective of your research work. The area of research, and highlight your specific work, and followed by names and affiliation of the author. The names and affiliation of the author, again here the name should not carry Mr., Dr., Mrs., something like that. It is a name, and now every journal has the different format. That's a given name and also surname. This must be followed. Now Indian will sometimes, we used to confuse. Now earlier paper I used to publish my paper, my name in the name of BalasivanandhaPrabhu. Now I have changed BalasivanandhaPrabhu Shanmugavel. That's the way I have. So now itself, when you start publish, you always go with a full name, given name, and followed by your last name. Last name supposed to be your parent name. So in that name you have to always present. Okay, and also affiliation is very, very important. That also must be presented. And see, in the title page or the beginning page, where now you are going to include the title and also the author and also some of the footnotes and symbol. If you are working on the mathematical formulation of some physical phenomena, then probably you may have n number of variables. All these variables must be listed in the front page itself. What is that variable? And psi. what is that represent? Probably theta, angle of extrusion or something like that, and probably T represent temperature, something like that. So if you have more than 10 parameters or something like that, no, it must be also specified in the first page itself. Now, because when you go inside the manuscript, if you have too much of variables, it may confuse the reader. So therefore, in the first initial beginning, you should also present all the footnotes and symbols and also the keywords. When you are selecting the keyword again, and supposing you want to be recognized as an expert in that field, always specify broad keyword first. At least one broad keyword. For example, if someone is doing composite material, research on composite material, probably you can say composite material, because whenever someone do some kind of a real search, this paper will be also coming. And if you're supposing specify, if you ignore the composite material and specific keyword like interface or probably fiber, something like that, in the broader keyword search composite, your paper may not come. So by way, you will be also losing the citations. Therefore, any paper that you publish, always put a broader keyway, broader subject area keyway, so that all the research citations, search, your paper will be also pulled out, so that no author may be interested, he may refer your paper. So that's one of the thing in the keyword. So keyword must be also selected. It is not just like some keyword, and what is majorly repeated or what is majorly focused on the paper, that must be the keyword for the paper. Okay. Then abstract. How to abstract? This is an area where all the PhD scholars fails. Abstract. The abstract is a summary of your work. Okay, you have to give away all the information in the abstract, because sometimes people say that I want to hide some details. Okay, I write only some description because there is a word limitation, 200 word limitation, because some journal represents that, apply that. No, you have to write everything within 200 words. So people deliberately neglect some of the critical information, and as a result, when a reviewer or editor reads your paper, and because before sending it to reviewer, the editor look at the abstract and also conclusion, that's all. Abstract and conclusion. So the abstract is more important, because whatever the critical information you want to pass on, that must be presented there. So your conclusion and the way in which you have done the analysis or data generation, everything must be presented. So you may ask, see, if everything is available, then why someone has to read the paper? You have to understand that you are not writing a paper to forcefully allow someone to read the paper. You are not writing the paper to forcefully, if I am writing a paper, I am not forcefully allowing you to read the paper. My attention is, you have to understand what I have done, that's all. So what I have done, if I give it in the summary format, in the abstract, that is sufficient. If the reader is interested to know further about this paper, then probably he will go through the paper. Otherwise, he will read only the abstract and then throw away the paper, that's all. So we are not writing a paper, technical paper, to forcefully allow someone to read the paper. That's the first thing. So what you have to do is give away all important results. Whatever critical result, important result, the general form of result must be avoided here. So something like general trend. For example, in mechanical engineering, materials engineering, if the grain size is reduced, obviously the hardness strength improves. So you need not spell it out that. It is a general trend. Okay, it's a general trend. So general discussion, the general way of behavior of anything can be excluded. Okay, only the novelty of something, a new results, a new interpretation, that can be presented in the abstract. Okay, so it is a brief account of the paper, relevant points must be there, so it is a summary of a work. So everything must be presented. It must stand alone without references to the text of the body. Okay, it must be stand alone. Okay, and also in the abstract, you should not provide any kind of abbreviation, any kind of a citations, that should not be also presented. Okay. But that is also allowed us. For example, I have written some paper, okay, where the extension of the paper I am presenting it another paper. Probably I can refer that. So, Journal of Composite Material here, and where this was done, and further based on that. So something, if you want to relate your previous paper, that is allowed inside the abstract, but deliberately you should not include references. Should include some information on the result obtained. Okay, length and formats are usually specified by particular journal. Most of the journal, they never have sort of what is called word restrictions, but some journals they restrict 200 words, something like that. Okay, so this point is very, very important. Straight away give all the information, very important information, everything you have to provide in the abstract. Then introduction. What's the way you have to write the introduction? Okay, the introduction is also very, very important, because where you are going to write about your problem statement. When you start writing your problem statement, straight away if I say, this is my problem statement, it may be new to a reader. If a reader is beginner, he may not aware about that problem. For example, in the composite system, the interface design is something critical. If I directly attempt to explain the interfacial design and the importance of interfacial design, and also the problem that I face in the interfacial bonding, then probably for many of you, it may not be understandable. It may not be, it may not be something easy to understand. So what I have to do is, you start with a broad spectrum of that area. Okay, so area, that means it is something like broad, the vision, it is surface level knowledge that you are going to give, and then when you go deeper, you focus on your problem. Okay, so something like when you casually know you have to start, as many of them know, these materials are used here, where in the service life, it is you are facing this problem. Because of that, service temperature and pressure, it creates debonding. So something like that. No, you start with a major area of research, and slowly no, you focus on your research problem. That's the way no, you have to write. Okay, some kind of it is something like a storytelling, kind of a storytelling. No, I start with the overall picture and I focus towards my problem, and so that no reader can be able to understand. If I start with a broader spectrum, and then if I go to a particular spectrum, then the broader people can be able to understand. So here, what is your work that you are going to present? Importance of your work, and then background information, literature survey. The background information is nothing but literature survey. Every paper that you write, before you present the objective or research gap, you must have substantial evidences for the literature review. The literature review is the one where you should have a critical analysis. For example, the writing literature review is also something very, very, very important. Very, very, very important. Because the way in which you write the literature, it's also very, very, sometimes the way for rejection. Because I come across some papers where people write some descriptions, where the next paragraph, Shan et al. Another paragraph, Shang et al. Another paragraph, Prabhu et al. So this kind of a format of writing should be completely avoided. That means, moment I look at the paper, the reviewer or editor will understand these people doesn't have ability or doesn't have the understanding how the paper has to be presented. Okay, so that means when you are writing a paper, the analysis of the literature survey is very, very important. How literature survey should be. For example, in a material system, for example, if I say that after some welding, after some severe plastic deformation, okay, my area of work is probably I'm a mechanical engineer, so I probably for others it may be difficult to understand. But I am a mechanical engineer, probably I can explain with the help of mechanical problem. So after severe plastic deformation, with the different process conditions, for example, by changing the extrusion ratio, temperature, then strain rate, the grain size reduction, that is I'm going to analyze. Then the literature survey must be written, start with something like that. The parameter X, Y, Z, that will be affecting the grain size. So this X parameter, temperature is a crucial factor. This was extensively studied by so and so, so and so, so and so. By providing this temperature to the worker, they have derived this much grain size reduction. By increasing this temperature, they have, so in citation, in bracket you have to provide. So instead of saying X demonstrated this, the way in which I conceive the information from the literatures, different literature, and I produce the literature in my own way. So therefore, there is no Mech.Engg et al., Prabhu et al. I put everything in my way of presentation. As a reader, when he looks at the paper, it would be more interesting for them, because you have given some overall picture. In that overall picture, you have presented the citation. So that's the way critical literature review must be written. Okay, don't start with the author name, Mech.Engg et al. So immediately the reviewer will reject it. Even though your paper may be very, very good, if you start writing this kind of a format, immediately the reviewer will reject it without spending much time on review the paper. Okay, that's one of the things. So a background information is very, very important. And also the statement of the problem. The statement of the problem must be very, very crystal clear. That must be presented in the paper. What you are going to present, that must be presented. Now sometimes this will build your paper, the work and the introduction. So this connects, there is a connection between your work and the introduction. So you start telling something from the overall perspective and come to a specific problem with the help of literature survey, and then finally you arrive at some problem description, research gap. So that's the statement of the problem. Okay, and proper review of related literature must be also presented to state your problem. Then statement of hypothesis of research questions, and very importantly, every research problem will have some limitations. Okay, every research problem will have some boundary condition, limitation. That limitation must be specified. Okay, that limitation must be specified. If I do something, I am setting up some parameter, so that is my boundary conditions. When I do something in the laboratory, I am setting up some parameter, so within that parameter, this result is valid. So that you have to explicitly stated in the problem. Otherwise, reviewer may ask several questions on this. Then definition of the terms. If there is a terms which are newly introduced and there is a terms which are very, very unusual in many of the paper, then these terms must be specified in the introduction section itself. Okay. Then the literature survey. This probably the part of your introduction, literature survey. We never have a literature survey, a separate entity, or probably a separate chapter, separate subsection in the introduction. It will be also a part of introduction. So the literature survey is very, very important, where literature supports your hypothesis and extends the previous work and avoid previous work. So avoid previous work, avoid previous mistakes. So when you understand the literature, when you read literature, probably the duplication will be stopped. You can stop your duplication. Okay. Probably if you do a proper literature survey, you will not do duplication. As a result, if you are probably unknowingly missing something when you are presenting the paper for review, and reviewer may quote that this is already published work. So you can probably minimize some wastage of your years. Okay. Okay. So how a literature survey should be. Okay. When you are writing a literature survey, it is something like that. No, reader knows. I must present some information. The reader knows. So when I am writing something on the composite material, I must write something like that. The composite materials are used in aircraft material, aircraft system, automobile system, and piston, connecting rod. If I say something like that, the broader spectrum of mechanical engineering group will understand, yes, this is a material which is used there. Okay. So the basic thing that I am giving a loop to them, so this is known to them. Okay. So when you are presenting, start with the reader know, and when you are coming down and specify the problem, and the reader may not know. Okay. So this is how the arrangement of literature survey should be. Okay. Literature survey start with the broader spectrum and fine tune and attempt to a region where there is unknown information. So the reader doesn't know must be presented here. And for example, the composite is a region, area I am working. So probably if I want to say something on the polymer matrix composites, I can say something about the polymer matrix composites and their general behavior, general application, something like that. Then some information on certain field. So what is the field I am going to focus now? Mechanism of deformation. Then improving the property, that is my area of domain. So in the first 2-3 literature, I'm going to take the broader spectrum, and then the next moment, once I clear with that, the next set of literature will be specified to deformation mechanisms and other thing, and in specific to deformation mechanism, finally I'm going to end up with the interfacial bonding. That's an area where most of the composites start to fail. So this is how you have to attempt to write the paper, okay, write the paper. Then your proposed technique and method. So the introduction chapter is over, introduction part is over. Now coming to the middle, in the beginning, you have again the methodology. So methodology may be experimental methodology, or sometimes experimental technique, or sometimes it may be a software development, or sometimes it may be a hardware development, or sometimes it may be a usage of techniques. So people may work in different fields. Some people may purely work on experimental technique. Some people may work on software, hardware development. And some people may work on taking some what is called model already developed, and you try to what is called create new models based on that. So three approaches normally we used to do. So your proposed technique, probably experimental technique or any technique, and can be divided into several subsections, provide general description of a technique or method you propose. That means the experimental work, you have to clearly state what is the kind of experimental work you have planned, what is the kind of ambient you have set up, and each and every descriptions must be specified there. In the form of, supposing if you need images and block diagram, that can be also there. And sometimes you can also write your own formulation of experimental plan, sometimes algorithm, or sometimes strategy, your own plan. That can, if you are doing some kind of exploratory kind of a research, then probably everything will be new to everyone. Even for you also it is a new one. Okay, so therefore you can newly write the algorithm and other things. And if it is a hardware, software related problems, okay, hardware, software related problem, provide description of how software is developed, okay, and computer specification, program language used, flowchart, block diagram, etc., and provide sufficient descriptions of hardware setup designed. And you have to also mention technical specification, block diagram, sensor limitation, component used, and photo of hardware. Again, when you are using this, very importantly, now you have to have a judgment whether I am going to use a photograph or whether I am going to use the block diagram. Because sometimes if you are working on the antenna system, a big antenna, if I take a photograph, nothing will be available in the photograph. It is something like a picture. I cannot specify what is the component, because there may be 1,000 components in the antenna system. Only I will be taking a photograph and will be presenting there. So instead of having a photograph which contains more component, it is very difficult to distinguish these component in the diagram. I can put a major block diagram showing major important component. Okay, so that's the way now you can present. So you have to have a judgment whether I am going with a photograph or illustrations or a block diagram. That you have to decide based on the problem or experiment that you are going to work. Highlight the uniqueness of your hardware compared to similar product. That also you have mentioned if it is a hardware, software related. And if it is an application of a technique, sometimes people combine some application of a techniques also. For example, in mechanical engineer, most of the people, they do some research, and also they take the ANOVA, Takuchi technique, something like that. So these technique, if you are integrating, then you have to also provide write-up about how simulation is carried out, including all assumption. And for example, FEA also is coming under this. FEA, finite element analysis. Okay, mechanical engineering people used to do. They used to probably carry some experiment, and also they used to simulate in the FEA software. Okay, so in the FEA software, what is the assumption they have made, and how they set the boundary conditions, and everything must be described here. And only discuss experiment which are relevant to show the effectiveness or superiority of the proposed technique. Okay, so that is very, very important. Then the result and discussion part, it is highly important. In some journal format, the result can be discussed separately and followed by discussion. In most of the journal format, the result and discussion will put together. So here, very important thing is, no, you have to present the data. Okay, presenting the data is more important. What form of data presentation? Because to present the data, you have different form of representation. I can present the data in the form of a graph, or I can present the data in the form of a bar chart, or I can also present the form of form of a table, okay, pie chart. So many different forms of data presentation is available. What form of data presentation is good for your research, that you have to decide. What form of a data presentation is good for your research, that you have to decide. So the data presentation is one part. Then the presentation, writing the data description, it is something like what you are seeing from the data. It is something called observation. What you observe from the data. Okay, you present the data and what you observe from the data. For example, if the curve is going something like that, I can say with respect to increasing this parameter, there is an increasing trend. That is your observation. You are not going to write nothing more than that. You observe the data, write the observation based on the data available in the form of any illustrations. Okay. Then probably there may be a declining. You can also say after this there is a declining. This is the observation. So first you present the data, write about the observation, what you see. In scientific writing, in the technical writing, the result and discussion must be based on the true evidences. You have to have a evidence to substantiate your discussion. Without having evidence, without having discussion, without having data, if you start discussing something, okay, it is something like a superfluous statement. Okay, no one will agree your statement. Okay, so in scientific writing, in the technical writing, you should have a proper data, valid data. So based on the data only, you have to have a discussion. Sometimes we take the argument for argumentation, we take some help from literature. So we take some sentences or we take some major concept probably, and with the help of that also you can discuss your data. That is also there by means of citing others' work. If the trend is similar to that, probably if they quote that, this is the reason for that. Now you can also state that for this kind of a behavior, similar kind of a behavior was observed by someone else, published in this paper reference, citing the reference. Okay, so they have suggested that this could be the mechanism, this could be the reason, this could be the way of this thing, that you can bring there. And so this is called cross citations you can do. Okay, so if you have a proper evidences, it is well and good. Otherwise, you can take the help from other previously published paper. Okay, so discussion must be based on evidences. That's the first thing that you have to remember. If it is lacking in the paper, then definitely the paper will be rejected. And so too many cross-cited discussion will be also not appreciated by many of the readers. Therefore, what is available with you, and based on that, you have to write. Okay, so here result can be tabulated in the several form, as I said. Usually comparison with the existing technique, conventional or otherwise, are required to show the effectiveness of proposed technique. So when you are writing your discussion, your data, you have to also compare with the previously published data. So what way your data is better, what way your method is superior. So comparison is very, very needed, otherwise it may not be appreciated. Then provide merit discussion, correct analysis of your experimental research, so the quality of paper. Always provide answer to why the experiment went such way. That is the discussion part. Always you have to. That's why very beginning I said in the paper writing there are two important things. One, you have to present the data and you have to persuade the audience. That means by means of discussion, by way of effective communication, you are going to have a persuasion with the audience. Okay. Every figure shown in the paper must be addressed. That's very important. See, sometimes people present so many data, but here, without referring the data, they used to write some arbitrary statement. So whatever data you are presenting in the form of a figure or in the form of a table, that must be cited. The table one source or table figure one source, that must be presented. So every data must be discussed. Every form of illustrations must be discussed in the main task without neglecting that. So every figure shown in the paper must be addressed in the text. Figure must be legible enough. Okay. Then what conclusion can draw from each experiment, that must be also presented. It is not something like, I present the data, I write discussion, What is your conclusion based on this resultant discussion? So 1 or 2 words must be there. What is the conclusion based on your resultant discussion? Okay, and in the discussion, reviewer rarely complain discussion is too brief. Okay, if your resultant discussion portion is somewhat lengthy, no one will say that your length is too long. No one will say. But rarely used to complain. Provide summary of result, how result lead to conclusion. Okay, so after every discussion part, you have to provide summary of your result. Place result in context of current knowledge. Okay, and then impact of data, unanswered question must be answered, and the limitation of a study. As I said, you have to also provide what is the limitation of this study. Okay, don't overemphasize your own work. It is something like beating your own trumpet. That should not be there in the paper, because sometimes that's a reason for rejection of many of the paper. If I try to say that my work is superior, that probably will hit the ego of the reviewer. If the reviewer is from MIT or Stanford, he will say, who is this man from Anna University? He is beating his trumpet. So he will simply reject the paper. So therefore, don't beat the trumpet. Okay, politely, everything must be politely discussed. Politely, you have to say. Another important thing when in terms of figures and legend, don't clutter illustration, because there are sufficient pages available to print. Many of the time, people sometimes merge too many figures. Nothing will be interpreted from the figures. So cluttering the images and other things must be avoided. Okay, go with clear imaging, and define symbols, abbreviations in legend. And sometimes people use notations and other things in the x-axis, y-axis without giving the abbreviation for that. So abbreviation must be presented in the x-axis and y-axis. Okay, and if the abbreviation carries units, unit must be also presented in the thing. Okay, you have to have a labeling of axis. Use same unit as in the text. Photo authenticity, that is very, very important. Okay, so sometimes people take a photo from other sources and simply publish it. That is a violation of copyright. So you have to properly get the permission from the source. That means source is a publisher, not author, publisher. So there is a link available for permission. If you look at the journal paper or journal web page, there is a permission link. So you have to click that, and normally every journal will allow free usage of maximum of 3 figures. 3 figures or tables. If you want to copy more than 3 figures and tape, then probably for each figures you have to pay some $15 or $20. It is depending on the journal. Some journal ask for $50 also. Therefore, you can, if with the proper permission, you are allowed to use 3 images. So if you are taking some images from other journal, get the proper permission. And other way, if you are taking the image and you are going to modify the image, okay, you take some block diagram from other source and you are going to modify based on your work, you need not get the permission from the sources, because you are adopting. So probably you have to cite that adopted from the source. You need not get the permission for that. Supposing without any modification, if you are taking the images and placing it in your paper, you have to get the copyright relaxation. That means copyright permission you have to get. Okay. And conclusion is very, very important point. Conclusion. The conclusion, general trend must be avoided. The general trend of presentation must be avoided in the conclusion. It should be more specific conclusion. For example, it is a more obvious thing that we come across in the mechanical engineering or materials engineering. People start to write, when I add this much percentage of reinforcement, the hardness of the composite increased. It is obvious. It is obvious. On addition of reinforcement, the hardness increases. It is obvious. I need not write that statement. But what is more specific, when I add 15% of reinforcement, I get 13% of improvement, 15% of improvement, hardness ranging from this value to this value, whereas other researcher reported that only 10% improvement, whereas by using this process, I have improved this value to this much, which is very, very higher among the literature reported values. If I write like this, it is a more specific. If I write general trend, immediately the reviewer will reject the paper. So the conclusion must be more specific conclusion. Even though if it is a general statement, if you write a more specific conclusion, it will be accepted. So in the conclusion part, highlight the major advantage of technique, method proposed when compared with other technique or conventional technique. Then re-emphasize by writing down novelty of your work. Okay, that is what is the novel part in that? Definitely, without novelty, you will not be awarded PhD degree. If you take someone's work and then if you do it, and then again if you reproduce the data, no publisher will allow your paper to be published. Something new. So what is something new? That must be addressed in your paper. Then you may also write down the limitation of your work such that the reviewer cannot attack the weakness of your paper. Even though if you have a limitation, explicitly you state that this data is valid within this domain, then reviewer will accept it. Okay, so the boundary, weakness and everything you have to accept it. Write suggestions to improve the problem, or if you have any idea to extend the problem, it is also better to state in the problem and finally in the conclusion, because if someone publishes, always you can say that is my idea that I have proposed, so no one will steal that idea. Okay, so because you are owning that idea. So the format of paper, almost all journals will have a definite format, so you have to go through the website and then download the format. Now you have to strictly adhere to the format, okay, a template. And references are also always required. No, writing the references must be in a proper format given by the journal. Usually, people does, they put some software, Mendeley software, something like that, where the formatting won't be there. Okay, if you simply upload it, there is a lot of chance that reviewer will say the references are not in the format. So always it is double check. It is better you can double check the format, whether this format provided by the Mendeley software, it's matching with the journal format. So that you have to doubly check. Then strategies in writing good technical paper. Okay, first thing you have to identify the novelty of your research work. List down the strength and weakness of your proposed technique. Provide good analysis. And most important, the language and the illustrations. The language language will come only to reading. If you read more number of literature, automatically you can understand what's the way the technical article must be written. That is also another negative point. When you read more number of papers, people like me, when I read more number of paper, when I start writing the sentences, it automatically shows more percentage of what is called plagiarism, because everything is stored in the brain, which automatically converts, because this is the way it should be represented. There is no other format to represent. So automatically I write like that. So as a result, when it goes to the software, detection software, it says 30%, 40%, and then I patiently I have to convert everything. So that's another problem. If you read more, automatically everything will be stored in your brain. As a result, when you start writing, it repeatedly comes. So the way in which you read, okay, will train your brain, and as a result, you can be also a good writer. So the language is more important, and illustration, proper illustrations are very, very important. So a good paper, okay, must be written properly with good language and illustrations. Okay, so this is all about writing the technical article. Okay, so there is another format of writing, that is proposal. Probably there is a separate portion or a chapter, probably needs another 1 hour discussion. So in this, okay, so if you have any doubts, probably